I would say we're a group of designers, architects, planners committed to creating thoughtful, beautiful, sustainable places.
We design buildings, but we also design places, and we look at the places in between. And when you look at that holistically and you put people first, that's the perfect elixir for great design and great architecture.
I'm the internal architect for Kirchhoff Companies. But at the very beginning, when the project was being developed, I pushed Joe towards the principles of new urbanism. I said, why don't we take some of those principles and start to do that here? They were a conventional developer. You know, Joe's background was in construction.
We've learned all the buzzwords, right? Creating place and all the stuff. What's that?
Activation.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can laugh about it because it's all valid.
Yeah,
like we can give him
true.
a hard time about it because he knows
Right.
we agree with it, and he makes incredibly compelling points, and it leads to great projects. Giovanni deserves an immense amount of credit for bringing new urbanist principles and some very, very fundamental concepts around planning and setback, scale and proportion and all sorts of stuff to keep things feeling very organic.
There's nothing better than an example, right? Like we borrow examples all the time. And Rhinebeck's just a very well-known, clean little village.
The main street of Rhinebeck, the scale, character, the incremental nature of the architecture there is very unique. And I think it was something that inspired all of us as we began thinking about what this main street could be.
This concept of having a main street and having parallel parking and having sidewalks that are 15 foot wide, by walking through Rhinebeck, that the depth of the sidewalk allows this to happen, right? Where you have people sitting out here and eating, you and I are communicating out here. When a 5-foot sidewalk would be very uncomfortable.
One of my earliest memories of us thinking about this project ever was you, Joe, and me going and having a sandwich at Rossi's in Poughkeepsie.
That's right.
It was exactly that kind of a spirit of tenant that you wanted to have here. And they ended up being one of the first tenants on the corner. And for me, that set the tone for the sort of authenticity of this whole place.
You get a few early sort of locally known, almost credentializing tenants. That helps immensely too.
Tremendously.
We had Premier Medical Group and then Rossi's, which is a very venerable, sort of well-known 40-plus-year-old family business here in the area.
We've had a company now for 45 years, and we always knew we were going to grow, and we needed a facility where it would give us the statement we were looking for.
We wanted to create a mechanism for them to own their own real estate. For us, it just creates permanence on Main Street, less turnover, more stability.
We did not want to go into a scenario where big box stores would kind of take over, and so the fact that these businesses would be owner-operated, meaning an owner was on site all the time, really persuaded us to do this project.
Here's one of the battles, right, that I had to fight internally. Hey, let's take a 6,000 square foot building get rid of it, put a green there instead, and put 4 500-square-foot cottages.
Yeah.
But once they understood that that green was going to be space for us to have our events, but also the small cottages became incubators, right?
To be able to have a small business come in and sort of test the waters there, and when they got their feet under them, then they could move into a more established retail space on the main street.
The bagel shop was one of our first tenants. He was so successful that he's in a larger building here. He ended up taking one of the cottages to do a second concept.
3.5 years ago, we opened the Eastdale Bagels. Now, a few months ago, we just opened up here behind me, Athena To Go. It's a little branch off of our restaurant that we have, Athena Taverna. When they first approached us, years ago, before this was even built, it looked great on paper, but I never envisioned it to ever look the way that it does now.
I really enjoy days like today when you can hear the kids on the square and watching people shopping and eating outside and enjoying themselves. They have no clue or any understanding of what's happened or what it's taken to create this place. It's very difficult to develop in New York, and people don't really understand new urbanism, and this concept of walkability or recreating a main street is almost foreign to Hudson Valley residents, so I see it as a win because it was actually developed.
It's hard to fathom and remember that this was basically an empty stretch of land. And you have created, and we have created, a place here that is now a regional destination, which is pretty incredible.
I started out this year by going to the National Conference for Young Architects for AIA. In that conference, there was a lot of people talking about what they wished their firms offered to support them as they were starting their career, starting their profession, and a lot of what they were saying are things that Union has already implemented. A lot of our programs are things that people across the country are looking for.
If there's a particular direction that you're interested in exploring, the firm is really, really supportive in helping you achieve those goals.
A lot of times, you're asked to sort of look at your, more long-term goals, and almost every time, if not every time, there's somebody that you're talking to who wants to help you get there. And that's really, really special.
I chose Union because they personify transformational leadership, which prioritizes mentoring. The second thing is them treating you as an equal, even though there's a difference in experience between top leadership and, say, my role, for example. Everybody is treated as a peer.
It really goes a long way, I think, for an individual to know that it matters where you want to be, and it matters to know that the firm is invested in helping you get there.
I've always felt supported in whatever I wanted to do.
I think being open enough as leaders gives people the comfort to ask questions and engage us in talking about aspects of the practice that we'd like to change in order to support young professionals more. I think the more informed and engaged people are at all levels of the office, the more resilient you are as a practice and the more capable you are as a practice.
I sought Union out because I knew that this was a culture of continual growth and continual learning. And they have well exceeded that expectation.
I am Diane Medeiros, and I am the Executive Director of East Bay Community Development Corp. We fulfill a need that I don't think many people think about. People who have housing and don't have to worry about it are so fortunate, but many, many people don't. We had kind of a rough start when we did our first development in Barrington, the Sweetbriar property. It was a struggle. It ended up at the Supreme Court, and it was able to be done, but it was not an easy process.
I'm Kathy Bassinet. I was the previous executive director. Sweetbriar was not easy, but it was worth every single day of the anxiety and worry to get it done. This development has been an eye-opener for not only folks who live here who were shocked to see this kind of a development, but for folks in the neighborhood who quite justifiably were anxious about it, but very quickly realized that this was going to be an addition, not something that they were going to have to be ashamed of.
My name's Elizabeth Paul, and I'm the property manager for Palmer Point and Sweetbriar. I actually live in affordable housing. I live it every day with my children. I'm a single mom, and I've been single raising them for like 13 years. So to work here, you know, I can relate to so many of these people.
My name is Maria. My friends call me Gigi. I lived in my home over 30 years. It was a difficult move for me. I knew I had to do it, but I had to really, you know, okay, is this going to be okay for me? Because I loved my house. I lost my husband to cancer many years ago, and it was difficult. But you also find strength, and when you make a decision and it works and it goes forward, and that happened here. I'm very, very grateful.
I'm Philippe Jordy. I'm the founding director, executive director for Island Housing Trust. We're a community land trust. We're a private nonprofit. We're also a community development corporation. We've had the good fortune most recently of working with Union, and we're working on some of the largest projects here on the island.
It's one of the things we love about Union Studio is their mission is shared with ours to make a good place that's specific to that location and is going to be a good home for the tenants. Affordable isn't only about the rent. And affordable is certainly not about the cost of the buildings, because to do a good building means it's going to last longer, it's going to be low maintenance, it's going to be low energy use for the tenant. High utility bills can make an affordable apartment unaffordable.
It just changes people's lives. You know, when they have the ability to have a place in their community and the stability to raise their children and or start a business, it makes all the difference.
Helping to create affordable and attainable housing on the island is just very rewarding. I worked for the town of Edgartown as their affordable housing manager for 6 years, and I've been on multiple boards for affordable housing. Honestly, it's so that everyone in the community can have something like this. I am a tenant at Scotts Grove, and I have been for 5 years.
This property means safety and security. It means community. It means that I can do the work that I do and that my kids can go to school and not have to worry about their home life. I mean, it means everything.
Who is affordable housing? It is your first-year police officer. It's your first-year teacher. It's your hairdresser. You know, it is everyone.
There are, I'm sure, affordable housing in some areas that are run down, but not here. Not here at all.
There's nothing that you could point to in this development that would make you say this is affordable housing. And that was our goal. It cannot be any different than the house behind it, and it wasn't. I wanted it to look exactly like it would look if this were a for-profit development. And I wanted the insides of each of these units to be what they were if they were purchasing them. I wanted the kinds of things that make people know how valued they are. I would say to my staff often, if when they walk into their houses, they don't feel comfort, then we have done nothing for them. If when they walk in, they feel valued, they will maintain their units. They will maintain the property around them.
The whole look of this place looks like a village to me. And I used to come here and just ride around, kept dreaming about being here before I moved. This is not something that you find. Affordable housing that's nice like this, that's built to make you feel like you're in a nice place.
Affordable housing is what we need more of. I think the developments are wonderful. I don't know who to thank. Who do I send the flowers to? But I think it gets a bad rap. Some people think that it's not something that can be a gorgeous place to live, a safe place to live.
The judge who allowed us to continue with this work here at Palmer Point, he said, "The ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned." And I think that's really what our focus should be.
I think years back it was like only poor, derelict people had to go into affordable housing or low-income housing, but that's changed. And there's such a dearth of just housing people can afford to rent or buy. So affordable housing is the answer. It's the only answer.
we were starting to experience some real concerning effects of climate change on the property and on the collections. Flooding in the basements that had never occurred before because of groundwater levels and the effects of storms, and then super high humidity levels were causing problems with humidity and mold in the buildings. This building holds some of our most important Hawthorne-related material, and everything was covered with mold. It was awful.
And then there was that large round of storms in Florida. A bunch of insurance companies canceled all of their policies on the East Coast, including ours. And so it really brought it into sharp relief that we had to take action.
We needed help, we really did. We really didn't know what we had, what we were dealing with, and we needed to have a plan.
That's exactly why we created the Coastal Resilience Grant Program. CZM is we're an office within the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Our mission is to balance human use with natural resources. The Gables was the first partner that worked on this proactive planning, this entire, comprehensive vision for the campus and the long-term adaptation of the infrastructure.
One of the things that became very obvious is that you can't keep a historic site the same when everything around it changes.
You started out talking about the change that the House of Seven Gables campus has seen and how it is a part of the Seven Gables history. And I think that really touched on something for us around how to think about the work that we knew would have to be a part of this planning process, potentially changing buildings, raising them up, moving them.
When we looked at the data we had gathered and looked at the flooding projections that were going to happen and realized that just raising buildings or dry flood proofing things was not going to work long term at all.
When we started this project with you all, I don't think any of us contemplated at the time the idea of picking up and moving this entire campus to the back parking lot. Like if we had brought that up in week one, you would have been like, you're completely crazy. You're out of your minds. Slowly, all of us through discourse and collaboration and working through it started coming both to the realization that yes, you can do this, and more importantly, you probably have to.
There were a lot of different things at play on this site with groundwater and with, the tides rising and the storms and the precipitation.
And thinking about those things and really pulling them all together and recognizing that it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution because everything is so site-specific. Where is the water coming from? It's not just the ocean.
One of the really nice outcomes was the idea around developing something like triggers that set in motion some of the steps that are outlined in that plan. And so by just trying to identify when certain things are happening in the environment or on the campus that you're noticing that is a time when you should do X.
And I think it's important to underline too that the plan isn't just a retreat, right? What it came down to was deciding, okay, we're going to have to do this for these historic buildings, but in the meantime, we're going to come in with these drainage measures that really actually benefit the neighborhood as we reimagine the campus.
Union's design of that phased approach and the way the campus will look during that time and then eventually look at the end of it was absolutely crucial in terms of allowing us to really envision how our visitors would interact with this site as well as the neighborhood.
So many coastal communities in New England in particular, so much of the historic, economic, and cultural lifeblood is tied up in the historic centers of these towns that are invariably going to be impacted by the waterfront. And I think these kinds of projects are beginning to make other communities who haven't really thought about it yet aware of what it takes to sort of begin thinking about how they plan for the future.
It's something that the entire country needs to grapple with. How are we going to deal with these existential issues that these communities along the coast, communities along rivers, it's something that we all need to kind of reprioritize and figure out how we're going to handle this as a nation.
The Cape Cod Commission is the regional planning, economic development, and regulatory agency for Cape Cod. We are charged with protecting the unique values and quality of life on Cape Cod by coordinating a balanced approach to environmental protection and economic progress. Even more simply put, our mission is really to keep a special place special.
The Commission approached me as a potential collaborator on the Community Resiliency and Missing Middle Initiative. I really wanted Eastham to participate because it was going to be an opportunity for us to look at some innovative techniques and best practices to address the housing crisis that's really affecting Cape Cod and especially Eastham.
I think there's some recognition across all levels of government on the Cape currently that there is a housing crisis. 80% of the housing stock across the region is single-family homes. 36% of the housing is used seasonally. With our median sales price for a single-family home over $700,000 across the region, our wages just not keeping up.
The lack of affordable and attainable housing is really a crisis.
Because there are so few opportunities for the missing middle housing types on the Cape, we're seeing younger families leave the region.
The success of this project in a lot of ways was the Cape Cod Commission's foresight and understanding that the first thing that needed to happen was to sort of change hearts and minds a little bit.
We kind of took a very grassroots approach to the work. We had stakeholder groups that we met with regularly, and we had a number of community meetings where we were able to get feedback through visual preference surveys and other feedback to see like what kind of housing is appropriate for the community.
We would even throw up two images and say, which one of these do you think has a higher density?
Throughout the workshops, Union Studio would present two different images and ask people, which one do you think is more dense? And oftentimes people wouldn't get it right.
I think people actually came to enjoy the community meetings that they came out to because we tried to make them interactive. We really tried to engage them and get them to think a little bit about it, and just recognizing that, you know, a lot of things they were really afraid of, they might have been fearing the wrong things.
I think the most impactful part of it has been this real underpinning of seeing is believing. People not realizing how much development exists on the Cape already that is of a very dense form, and yet it is already that beloved Cape Cod architecture.
Some of the things that did exist on the Cape historically, like the really dense cottage neighborhoods that were there, you know, in the past that, you know, in recent history have largely been, you know, zoned out of possibility. Even those examples were of a density that people really didn't quite understand. It was nice to sort of bring those back and remind people that those kinds of types can really be an important way to add density into their communities.
One of the big elements here was demystifying the numbers around density. When people try to calculate it out on a numerical basis, things like 20 units to the acre can sound really scary, but we were finding examples of little duplex units that were on a lot not much bigger than the building itself.
Some of the key aspects that this project embodies in terms of the Community Resiliency by Design project, really breaking up the massing into smaller buildings, multiple buildings. You're not looking at one large apartment building, so breaking it up into forms that also have your typical Cape Cod architecture components like the gable roof, the shingling, at a scale that is traditionally found throughout the region.
The report has been hugely successful in that it's really been able to communicate to our towns across the region where we're lacking and what types of housing we're lacking.
We just completed some zoning amendments this past May, which were all approved unanimously, and it really reflects the work that we did in the Missing Middle initiative. So really in Eastham, we were able to take almost all the best practices and recommendations that were in the report, incorporating form-based code directly into the zoning, allowing the missing middle housing types into the land use table.
There have been at least 3 specific RFPs that have come out from communities on the Cape using the actual sites that we studied as part of the Cape Resiliency project.
I think there's still a lot of work to do. And I think many of our communities are embracing this type of design and this type of movement towards housing development across the Cape.
Buff, I think it's congratulations on the CNU Award, a Charter Award. It's a big deal. What was it about Westminster Street that you found appealing?
Well, it's a classical street. The way, the spatial distance between the buildings, the quality of the buildings themselves.
Yeah.
They hadn't been torn down and replaced with modernist buildings.
Right.
So we began to try and figure out how to make the economics of it work.
Right. Shall we walk a little bit?
Yeah,
Let's do
sure.
a little stroll.
I mean, one of the things that you guys did, you took this historic building, we had the opportunity to do an addition onto it. And so you're faced with how do you put an addition on a historic building and make it 1 + 1 = 3.
Right. Exactly.
And you did that.
Do you like it?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the people that live in those apartments like it too. So no, it's a total win.
I mean, I've known downtown Providence for a long time, and I sort of watched this building go up and kind of wondered what it was going to be and what it was replacing, because this was the communal gathering area here on Grant's Block. This was where Movies on the Block was. I mean, I often think as we're in the back bedroom that I'm where the screen used to be, and this is where all the rock and roll yard sales were, and to see that space transformed into a real place that celebrates the middle of the town. The fact that they didn't build another building there but turned it into a thing, it makes the neighborhood a real neighborhood.
We love being able to walk everywhere. We hardly ever use our cars.
It's turned into sort of the best spot in Providence. So,
The one thing I love about this building is it's the Art Deco. We think this is chartered around 1930s, and then you have the high-rise historic building, the Lapham building. You see the chevrons up above? We had to recreate those.
Right.
So those got remolded and cast as concrete. So can you talk about the retail a little bit?
We only do independently owned mom and pop stores.
Right.
We want to do things that enhance the community feeling. And then we want the opportunity to have a variety that's needed for people living here.
What's your coffee, Bob?
Yeah, sure.
All right. What do you want?
Just a black coffee.
Black coffee? Okay. Hello. You guys don't mind if we come in and say hello with a coffee?
As business owners, we're first-time owners.
We've been able to forge a lot of really great partnerships and relationships with folks who live upstairs, folks who work downtown. It's really nice to sort of feel like a neighborhood spot.
And the one unique thing about these particular projects, not the addition or here, but Witt and Lapham had second floor office.
Right.
Of which we took a space.
In 2019, when we decided that we needed to expand and our office needed to move, we were in the midst of the revitalization project for this Westminster block, and it just made sense for us to want to be here.
It really has lived up to the potential that we saw in it. It has been a wonderful collaboration space. We're really happy that this space is able to do that for us.
There was a building here, right? It was in poor shape, tore it down, right? With the intent to build a new building, right? 2008 hit, everything just collapsed, right? In the interim, you started to populate a park with a bocce court, start to amenitize a particular area. Film in the park, forgot about that.
Yeah.
That became an institution in and of itself.
Yeah.
So now you start to come back, okay, it's time maybe for the building. Everybody's up in arms to say, well, you can't take our park away.
Right.
So,
including me.
Yeah. so the irony is now you have what maybe this place didn't realize what it needed.
Well, it was the center of our neighborhood here, and it was a place for people to be able to sit out and converse and say hi to your neighbor in a wonderful environment.
The revitalization of all of this that we've seen over the last 20 years is due in large part to the vision, the patience, the investment, and the commitment of Buff Chase and Cornish Associates.
Those that preceded us did wonderful work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we've got to live up to that. Thank you to CNU and all your Charter Award members for picking this wonderful project and honoring Union Studios, who've done a great job here in Providence.
As you say, it's a partnership. So, thank you. Chin chin. Thanks, Puff.